Well, we got about 6 or 8 inches of beautiful snow, and so we gotta clean up the house here, and then we'll get to the greatest snowmobile Polaris ever built. This is where my dad went to school. The farm is right through them trees at the end of the shot, right there. So yeah, when he grew up, there was a one-room schoolhouse there, and they had to walk this way, and then several of the farm kids from this neighborhood walked up here. So there is a dip in the road right here, so yes, technically he did have to walk uphill to school both ways, and we hear about it. Well, there she is, guys. Just gorgeous, just gorgeous. The 800 XCR triple. That means 3 cylinders, 3 pipes. It's the bottom end, like the old Ultras and 600 SP, the case reed bottom end. Just classic muscle, just classic muscle. So 2000 was the first year that they came with this body style, and they are just fantastic sleds. So this one, as it sits right now, the last time it was on the ice was 117 in 1,000 feet. There's 117 miles an hour in 1,000 feet. Stock heads, stock pipes, stock carburetors, my port work on the crankcase and on the cylinders. Polaris's new 800 Indy, even at 120 pounds lighter, 120 pounds lighter. That means you'd have to put a passenger on the new sled to get to the same weight as this. It is not coming close to what this could do. This triple engine, once you do a little port work to it, it is pissed off. It is pissed off. To make, I don't know, 170 horse with stock pipes, I don't know, maybe that's not possible, but it absolutely is just nasty. The buddy, so I did this port work for him, and then he ran it on the ice for a couple years, and it did 132. In 2,000 feet, it did 132 miles an hour. So in 1,000 feet, it did 117. At the time, they had some new Indy axes and the latest and greatest from Polaris, Arctic Cat, and Skidoo out on a lake, and the same tuners, you know. They were doing like 114 in 2,000 feet, and this thing at 2,000 feet was at 132. Unbelievable. So the port work that I do starts with a crankcase. If you're not porting the crankcase to match your port work on the cylinders, you're only doing half the job. So I simply put it in the mill machine, and I bring out a 1/16 to almost of an 1/8 of an inch on all 3 sides here and open it up. So on a trail sled, I'd come out a big 1/16 of an inch on all 3 sides, and then I bring this one to match. So this is an already trail ported cylinder. This is a very typical, nice, good, conservative trail port job. They started to knife edge these right here, but they didn't do a good job. They didn't bring it right out to the edge. So there's still some blunt. You can kind of see how blunt that is compared to here where it's literal knife edge. It is knife sharp. So if your air getting shoved up that side, you're gonna split that knife edge a lot better. And little things like that, and then you can see how this radius here is kind of polished up. This one they cleaned up a little bit. If stock, they were kind of slaggy and ugly. And back here, you can just see how much that one is opened up. You know, compare the two. Like I said, you're a little over a 1/16, almost an 1/8 of an inch on all 3 sides, and then that carries through. You get rid of this lip right here. That's still right there. Kind of see that little line right there. That line, that's going to interfere with airflow. And then we set the cylinder on top of the case, bolt it down, and then while the case is still in half, then to finish off the job, I'll come up from underneath here and check, you know, because you can see right, you can see there's the opening. The cylinder would be right here, And you can see how we kind of work the bottom of that land area, kind of radius that off to help air get around that corner, less turbulent. The smoother the airflow, the more horsepower you make. And then the other big thing is we come in on this exhaust port. So you can see right here how big that sucker is. It's several millimeters taller, so it matches the top of the other port, where this one it's several millimeters lower than that other port, and that's huge. That is huge. And we raised the main one up. We went up several millimeters on this main one, and on this one we bring up, and that kind of changes the RPM of the motor. So with all this work, we'll come in at 8,700 on the trail. This one's going to be 81, 82 on the trail. This one's going to be kind of a tractor. This one's going to be just a pissed off, nasty two-stroke. So it takes me, you spend an easy 2 to 3 hours per cylinder, and then 2 to 3 hours on the crankcase. So times 3, you know, you got 3, 6, 9. You got 12 hours worth of machining work, all done by hand. Other than the mill machine, this one I do just toss to the mill and just strike it over, and it's done. Phenomenal power. These old 800s, to make 200 horse on motor only, easily doable. I would love to see the day when a new 800 an 800 twin is making 200 horse, even with twin pipes. I'd love to see the day. In race form, these 800 triples are around 220. Some guys are claiming 215 to 220. The sled overall, it is smooth from the cockpit. So I'm removing the pipes. We got to put a trail track on. So here's the trail track. It's a Ripsaw 2, Camoplast Ripsaw 2, because the track that's on it now is our ice track. That's a 1/2-inch lug. And you can see them little needles. They give us about a 1/2 inch of penetration in the ice, and they're just mild steel. They're literally needle sharp. And that's all we use to hook onto the ice, and it would launch super hard. So to put the track on, we got to pull the front drive shaft and drop the rear suspension. To change jetting, we got to pull the airbox and pull the carbs. So we got to pull the exhaust off and pull that stuff. But that's my tuning box. So when we used to do speed running, or this year we can't because the ice is just horse crap. So this is kind of how we did it. Is you had all these different helixes, so they would change the load on the engine and how the machine would shift, and you had all these different secondary springs that would go with the helix, and they were adjustable, and that would, between them two, would change the way so you could use the same spring through several different helixes and the machine would operate completely different. You'd change primary springs depending on the conditions you're in, so you could change your engagement RPM and keep the same shift RPM, or change shift RPM, wide open throttle, or you could change both, just for changing conditions and different setups. So you had a handful of primary springs. If it was a cold day, ice is super hard. You could accelerate out of the hole a little bit harder, so then you could be a little more aggressive in the secondary. But the big thing on speed running, miles per hour, was just overall efficiency. So the more spring tension and you had in the secondary, that you could lose miles per hour, but your ET would be almost exactly the same. So very, very, very different from a drag setup. And then I had a few sprockets, a couple different chains, and then weights. You had all sorts of different weights. Well, then we got these adjustable weights. So as the motor shifts, there's mid-range, there's top end, by adding and removing weight from there. And in this hole, there's a weight that you can move. You can have it real light on the engagement, a little more revvy, less power to the track. And as you go, you could add a lot of weight. So you could watch your tack, and you could actually just have it go, 87, 8800, and then just kind of, like a dyno pull, and just make that sucker work for it. But yeah, this little toolbox, that's how we did it for all these years, and just change stuff up. And so that's what we're doing. One thing that makes these old sleds so fast is look how that track comes off up front, and it's pretty near flat. It doesn't come off the drivers and go down and then around. Every time you bend that track, it costs you miles an hour. That's why you don't run wheels on the Hyfax if you have a good lube system. If you don't have a good lube system, the tiniest bit of friction to that Hyfax, there goes miles an hour. On these old Indys, you can see the big heavy torsion spring here. You got a bolt there and a bolt there. The trick to getting these old Indys out is unhook this coil spring here. Unhook this coil spring, sweep it back, and that will allow that arm to move, and it will let that collapse. Then it's super easy just to wrestle it out. It's on a short track, nothing's ever easy because it's also tight up in the tunnel, but it makes it tremendously more easy. This side's pretty easy. You just got the speedometer drive. It's a bearing cap, just a flange bearing like anything else, Around the farm we have 100 of them. 3 bolts. This side's, that disconnects the drive shaft from the tunnel, from the chassis. Then on this side we just pop the chain cover off. There's a pain in the ass snap ring down in that lower drive shaft, and then we can bring the drive shaft this way after the rear skid is out. There's our cover. So for speedrunning, we got a lot of science in the chain case too. We normally go, this is aluminum gear. Normally you want, what we found is by going to a bigger gear, that's your lever. So your hand is out here turning a breaker bar. Is it easier for you to turn the breaker bar if you're on a tiny gear way inside or if you're a larger gear way outside? And so you get more levers. To go outside, and on top, you just run a bigger gear on top just to get you to the physical mile per hour goal that you need to be. But there's our, so we'll pop this bottom gear out, we'll take this top gear loose. Now for trail riding, we're going to the opposite. I'm going to go to a bigger gear on the bottom and a terribly smaller gear on top. Just like your truck, drop her down, from overdrive, triple overdrive. Let's bring her back into second gear and let the engine rev. So I got the gears out. The snap ring is a pain in the butt right there. Kind of a tricky bugger. So the new track has, because of shipping, has a couple hard folds in it. So I take advantage and I tuck one of them folds very up at the tip top. So I didn't have to take the chain case off. Normal guys take that chain case off. But on this sled you got liquid cooled brakes. So you got to take that brake caliper off, and sometimes you might have to crack the water lines, depends. But you tuck that fold, natural fold in that top corner and push the track up, and then the next shipping curve, it just makes that loop. So then you just drop the axle in and pull it back up, and we should be good to go. There, so now the track is holding that shaft for us. So while it's right here, then we get one nut started on that speedometer cable. Let's get all three on there. There we go. I know what you're thinking is, if I had to drive that bearing out, how am I getting that bearing in? Well, 3/4 inch drive, 1.5 inch socket with a puller bolt hooked right to the shaft. It pushes right on the outside race of the bearing, walks it right in. To get it, the first step is I use one of the bottom gears to kind of get it squared up and started, and then switch over to the socket, walks it right in, boom, done. So we got gearing in. So I got 2239. The stock gearing was 2439, and that was good for about 108 at stock RPM. With 22, rule of thumb, about 6 miles an hour of gear on this sled for top two, so we lose 12 miles an hour. So you're just under 100 mile an hour on the gear case, except we raised the operating RPM. So you're still, you know, 102, 103 mile an hour at 1-to-1 on the clutches, but this sled can shoot well into overdrive, so still more than fast enough. And the chain looks really nice.